Hey everyone, if you want to make your own podcast but you don't know where to begin, Spotify for Podcasters makes it super easy. They've got everything in one place, it's totally free, and you can make money while doing it. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start doing it today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also supported, and you can even conduct polls and Q&As. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, the platform is totally free. No catch, totally free. When I wanted to start my own podcast, I did not know where to begin, and I didn't think it was even possible. And Spotify for Podcasters made it happen. They made it easy, they made it quick, and I am doing something that I love. What more can I ask for? So if you're interested in starting your own show, you can do it, and I highly recommend you give this a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you here on this Thursday morning. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Hope your week is going great. Today, wanted to take a look at an article, or rather a research article that was published in the British Journal of Pharmacology recently, and is taking a look at the potential for mitragynine, the primary alkaloid in kratom, to cause respiratory depression, and more specifically looking at some evidence that this research has found that shows that there might be a ceiling to whatever existing respiratory depression there might be. And I find this fascinating because this is one of the few things about kratom that, I honestly don't know. It's one of the few things where it's like, this could be a danger. And so I want to know if it's something that people should be worried about and if I should be worried about. So I wanted to jump out of my comfort zone and really look at this scientific article, even though I'm really not that great at science, because I think it's important. So I'm stretching myself here, but hopefully you can all come along with me for the ride as we try to become scientists for today. So that's what we're going to do. As always, I'm going to put the link to this research article in the description of this podcast. So here we go. So this is taking a look at mitragynine and 7-OH mitragynine, which I've never heard of before, but from my understanding, I'm going to read. This is going to be, I just trust me, this episode might be a little bit tedious when it comes to the scientific terms and everything, but if you can just bear with me, the findings are pretty significant, I think. So with that in mind, this is looking at mitragynine. I'm going to read this first part of the paragraph here, background and purpose. Mitragynine, the major alkaloid in kratom, is a partial agonist at the mu-opioid receptor, the MOR. Then there's this CYP3A dependent oxidation of mitragynine results in the metabolite 7-OH mitragynine, a more efficacious MOR agonist. So from that, my understanding, and I might be wrong about this, but my understanding is that mitragynine in your body goes through this process through interacting with this enzyme, CYP3A, through oxidation, some sort of process that is well beyond my brain, and it results in this metabolite called 7-OH mitragynine. Okay? And that seems to be more efficacious when it comes to, acting on that MOR receptor. Still with me? Good. So in this, it has experimental approach. Respiration was measured in awake, freely moving mice using whole body plethysmography, which I had to look that up, and it says that measures changes in volume in different areas of your body. And it measures these changes with blood pressure cuffs or other sensors. So that's all attached to a plethysmograph. Still with me? Great. We're almost through the tedious part. So then it says that that basically these mice were given morphine, 7-OH mitragynine, and mitragynine, and they were all administered orally. Here are the key results. The respiratory depressant effects of mitragynine showed a ceiling effect. whereby doses higher than 10 milligrams per kilogram produce the same level of effect. In contrast, 7-OH-Mitragynine induced a dose-dependent effect on mouse respiration. In other words, so far, summing this up, Mitragynine, after you get to a certain amount per, body weight, you don't really see any increased level of respiratory depression, no matter how much, versus the 7-OH-Mitragynine, which is, after it goes through that process in your body, if you are given that orally, that is completely dose dependent. So you can just keep on increasing mouse respiration depression based on the dose. And then it says at equidepressant doses, so I'm assuming at the same dose that it takes to have the same amount of respiratory depression, both Mitragynine and 7-OH-Mitragynine induced prolonged anti-nociception. And I looked that up, and anti-nociception is basically the body's ability or response to toxic stuff, like chemicals, for instance. So I'll read that again. So at equidepressant doses, right, both Mitragynine and 7-OH-Mitragynine induced prolonged, response to this supposedly toxic thing. Inhibition of CYP3A, so the inhibition of that enzyme, reduced Mitragynine-induced respiratory depression and the body's response to the stress without impacting the effects of 7-OH-Mitragynine. So the conclusion is that these data suggest that such metabolic saturation at high doses may underlie the improved safety profile of Mitragynine. I just think that this is fascinating. It's definitely tough to wrap my head around, and like I said, I'm not like a sciencey person to this degree. So this was very difficult for me, and I had to read through it a number of times and look up a lot of words. But essentially, this is what I'm getting from it. And if there's any scientists out there that think that I'm way off base, please just tell me. But I think that I've got the basic idea. Basically, it's saying that after a certain point, there is a ceiling to which the amount of respiratory depression that can happen will happen when it comes to Mitragynine. That's not the same for this product of Mitragynine after it's acted on in the body, if you're introduced to that directly. But if you're just talking about Mitragynine, it seems to be that there's a certain amount you're taking ratio to your body weight where there's a ceiling. There's a cutoff because your body physically can't process it to, respond to it with respiratory depression any more so than it already is. Does that make sense? I think that that's what this is saying, which is really interesting. Now, of course, the next step rationally would be to look at that ratio of, Mitragynine to body weight and see what that looks like in a person. So it's 10 milligrams of Mitragynine to 1 kilogram of a mouse. So that's when the respiratory depressant effects showed a ceiling. So let's do the math. In a person, if I am 70 kilograms, which I am, that would mean that to show this ceiling respiratory effect, I would be taking around 700 milligrams of straight up Mitragynine. Now, I didn't know what the amount of Mitragynine it is that you're getting per gram of Kratom, so then I had to do that math. I looked it up, and it looks like the average amount of Mitragynine you'll find in any given dried leaf powder, gram of Kratom, and this varies, but, I'm just kind of doing an average of what I found, was about 15 milligrams. So that's 15 milligrams of Mitragynine to 1 gram of dried leaf Kratom powder. So that means that it would take something like 43 grams for me. If I took 43 grams of Kratom, that is where I would hit the ceiling of respiratory depression. Now, that is the end of my research, and now I'm just kind of left thinking about that. I'm kind of going to talk through this episode to understand what that means by, I'm talking to myself here. But, so let's see. If I'm taking 43 grams, so I'll never do that, obviously, that's a lot. But some of these people who have died, had extracts, Kratom extracts. And I could see them being able to get to 43 grams if they weigh 155 pounds like I do, in dried kratom powder leaf equivalent. That's like, they're using extracts though. So that would be a lot easier to get there. So basically the thing that I'm grappling with is like pretty much all of the deaths that involve kratom, they have other substances in their body, right? So basically for the people who are considered to have overdosed on one of those drugs that they have, let's say it's somebody with fentanyl, cocaine, and kratom, which that's a pretty common one that I've found in all those studies. Let's say it's that. Let's say that it's assumed that the fentanyl is what did them over. They, obviously went through a lot of respiratory depression because of too much fentanyl, but how much of the respiratory depression could have been contributed to by kratom if they had taken a lot of kratom extract? And that's kind of what I'd be interested to find out, because this is like this is why I think this is so significant. So this is getting to the crux of the episode. The reason why I think this is so significant is because this puts a number on the actual limits to respiratory depression from mitragynine. It's not a perfect number. It's not sealed tight. There's other factors, obviously. And, there's got to be a lot more research on it. But like, this is the first time where we're getting a ballpark idea of how much respiratory depression can happen based on how much kratom is in someone's body. And it's not perfect. It's, I know it's not that simple. There's other stuff too. And you're also not just taking mitragynine, but I'm just like, just for the sake of the argument, it's interesting to think if someone takes a certain amount of fentanyl and it's known to cause a lot of respiratory depression to the point where it kills you, after a certain point. And then on top of that, you have taken, 3 kratom extracts and it equals however much, you can figure out how much of a chance that kratom might have contributed to it. And I don't know, it's like, it's just, I always find it interesting when you can start putting numbers to something that previously you couldn't. Like, this is literally putting a number to the amount of respiratory depression one can experience from taking a bunch of kratom. Isn't that crazy? So, I don't know. I'm just kind of ruminating about it. I don't really have a takeaway for this episode. Sorry if it's not really that climactic, but it took a lot of effort to get through this thing. I've got 20 tabs open on Google and scientific dictionaries and stuff. Meanwhile, one of you, went to, college for biology and is laughing your butt off at me. But hey, I'm trying. So let me know what you think about this one. If you have any insight, I got to talk to a scientist one of these days because you all know a lot more than I do. And I might have butchered this, but this was my first and only attempt at really deconstructing a research article to its fullest. And I probably did a mediocre job, but I think that it's an interesting topic and something that everyone should pay attention to. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go take a nap now. I'll talk to you all tomorrow to wrap up the week.